Hey, what's going on everyone? Calb here, and I wanted to make a video about the heat weapon system. I've been seeing a lot of comments on these weapons claiming that they may be bad or not as good as other options, when I think it's quite the opposite. A lot of it comes from misunderstanding of how the weapons work, and so I wanted to cover everything that there is to cover with these weapons. Starting off with, we have two weapon types: dynamic heat weapons and balanced heat weapons. We're going to start with balanced heat weapons. Starting with the only balanced heat weapon that we have in the game at the moment, the M17 Fast Talker, we can read the following. Increases damage versus powerful combatants. Very low heat generated. Reload to vent heat this weapon. Overheating forces a sustained vent. Manually venting at very high heat greatly increases venting speed. So the first thing you're going to notice is that we don't have a reload stat, nor do we have a typical magazine stat. We have heat generated, cooling efficiency, and vent speed. These work pretty similar to the mag and a reload system. However, all these guns essentially have auto reloading in the background. So if you were to never reload with these weapons, they would automatically reload themselves like an auto loading or reconstruction weapon would. However, how are we supposed to know how much ammo we have in each magazine? That's actually quite easy to understand. Heat generated essentially tells you how many shots can be fired in a pool of 1,000. So if we have a heat generated of 12, we do 1,000 divided by 12 and round up to get our magazine size. We can compare M17 Fast Talker to another 900 RPM SMG, and we can see that it fires for way longer without needing to reload. Besides having a larger magazine, what else is cool about heat weapons? Well, they have increased damage against powerful combatants. This is a base level buff and will make these weapons superior to all other weapons at a default value. A little bit of power creep if you ask me. However, an issue I've had with Destiny 2 is that legendary weapons, especially primary ammo legendary weapons, don't feel good at times. So if this primary ammo weapon can feel better, I'll take it. In a minus 30 environment inside of the firing range, I hit the target frame for 20 damage per shot. With a similar SMG, I only hit for 17. Against the Cabal boss, I hit for 15 and 13. Note that the firing range isn't a perfect way to find the exact values of what you're looking for. Damage is often squished down, and so you never know if something is being rounded down or rounded up. But regardless, we can see that there's at least a 10% increase between one weapon frame versus the other. So certainly there has to be some sort of catch. So far, I've shown off that we have a bigger magazine size and more damage on this weapon. Surely there has to be something wrong with the reload. In my opinion, there's not really. It reloads pretty quick if you understand how to reload these weapons. As you can see when I'm firing, in my crosshair, there is a gauge in which I should reload at. Every time I hit that certain gauge, I get a special effect. For balanced weapons, it is a faster venting speed. Let's say I get all the way to the max without venting. This is going to be the result. Much slower to the normal speed, however, quite worth it in my opinion. Even if you mess up, there's still a lot of strong benefits when it comes to the balanced heat weapons. Let's move on to dynamic heat weapons. We're going to use the Compact Defender, as it's one of my favorite weapons this season, as an example. Like the balanced heat weapons, they still have the same vent speed, heat generated, and cooling efficiency stats. However, they do tend to generate more heat per shot, but to make up for that, they do also pack a higher base damage and increased damage against powerful combatants, higher than both the base heat weapons and their normal counterparts. But there's also another major key difference. The reload effect is activated differently than how we do our balanced heat weapons. As you can see with my crosshair, I don't have any bars to activate anything. That is because you need to do it while it is venting. If you cancel your vent right before it reaches that 0% mark, you'll get dynamic heat limiter. And what that does is quite fantastic. Let me show you an example. It essentially doubles your magazine size for the duration it is active. And it's pretty easy to trigger once you get a hang of it. There are a few sound cues that you could listen for, or you could just look at the reticle. Either one works. So what are the stats that you should be looking for on a heat weapon? Quite honestly, I think the best bet is just to maximize your magazine size. And by doing that, it allows you to shoot for way longer, dealing more damage per magazine than you would any other weapon in the game. The way to increase your magazine size is by reducing your heat generated. Now, while the stat does say plus 10 heat generated, it actually means quite the opposite. It means less heat generated, which is good. You may be thinking, well, what about cooling efficiency? And while that does seem great, it's not really worth the damage loss. In a lot of cases, your increased cooling come at the cost of your damage. It may be able to reload a bit faster, however, the damage loss isn't really worth it in my opinion. In terms of magazines, ionized heatsink is the best one in my opinion. It massively reduces your heat generated, allowing you to shoot more shots per magazine. As you can see on screen, the difference between 16 and 12 heat generated per shot is a massive increase between magazine sizes. Even more so when you consider that the default value, the M17 Fast Talker, is actually 18. Now, before I go into role recommendations, there's probably something you've noticed about Y weapons in particular. It has a unique origin trait, Accelerated Assault. Dealing sustained damage with this weapon slightly loads more ammo from reserves or removes more heat, and increases damage. This is a very powerful origin trait. When on a tier 5, I believe it gives you a 6% damage increase because it's an enhanced origin trait. Typically, it is a 5% damage increase. But on top of that, it removes your heat, allowing you to fire for way longer than you would. In my opinion, I think this origin trait is a must-have for heat weapons if you're trying to get the most out of them. That being said, how do you get this origin trait on heat weapons? Well, it's just RNG. Farming the Walls Frontiers, you're able to get a shiny at any point. It doesn't matter what tier it is, it can always be shiny. And know this, a tier 4 shiny is still stronger than a tier 5 non-shiny. So if you get one that isn't tier 5, still keep it, as it'll be better in all scenarios. Here is a side-by-side comparison between a non-shiny and a shiny version of the weapon. When it comes to getting good rolls on these weapons, I think it's good to start out with a good magazine. I think ionized heatsink is still going to be the best bet in most scenarios. This allows you to shoot more shots per magazine, which does affect the super stat. The more shots that can be fired, the better. Next, I always like handling on my weapons, so I'm going for a fluted barrel roll. When it comes to the master perk, there isn't a heat generated one, so you can go with anything that you want to go with. However, I'm going to take cooling efficiency, so the auto-loading process of my weapon is a bit faster. So I almost get the same benefits from something like accelerated heatsink without the damage loss that is associated with it. With all that out the way, what I recommend for the M17 Fast Talker. It's going to be attrition orbs and target lock. These synergize with each other quite well and with how you want to use these weapons in general. I feel like target lock's a really good perk as it gives you the damage that you need for the target that you're facing. The more shots you put into a target, the more damage you'll start doing. It may not have the same clear speed as something like Master of Arms, but it'll always have the damage that you need for it when you need it. Up next, we have the modified B7 pistol. This is a 180 RPM dynamic heat weapon that uses primary ammo, not to be confused with the other dynamic heat weapon that uses special ammo. Following the same formula that we've used before when it comes to barrel, magazine, and masterwork, we're just going to look at its perks to save you some time. All or Nothing is a strand 540 RPM dynamic heat weapon that uses primary ammo as well. Personally, I've been a big fan of this weapon in PvP, so I haven't really been trying it out in PvE as much as I would like to. Compact Defender, our last primary ammo dynamic heat weapon, is a bit of a wild child. While this is my favorite weapon this season, it also is a bit difficult to manage with its heat. Uncivil Discourse is our final dynamic heat weapon. However, this is a special ammo 180 RPM hand cannon, and it's quite powerful. If you haven't seen what it can do already, I highly recommend looking up Solo 2-Phase Witness. If you like this video and would like to see more, please let me know. Until next time, stay safe out there, Guardians.